Hey everyone, and welcome back for another exciting session here within Unchained's um, insight into the future of digital and fashion and commerce. It's a really exciting intersection looking at Web 2 industry adoption, metaverse building, and application of these Web 3 technologies everyone's talking about. So I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, who's going to be delivering a presentation all around phygital fashion, building on that theme we were talking about in the panel earlier, and one we will be picking up again in the next panel too, and talking about NFT utility in 3 layers. But I'm gonna leave it there and hand the mic straight to Lauren to do a quick intro in a bit more depth. So Lauren, how are you doing?
Doing well. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I might have a bit of background noise, but that sometimes tech doesn't work so well
No,
in these
I hear you.
situations. But
I hear you, see you. Everything's good. So I will just turn
perfect.
myself off and hand the reins straight to you.
Sounds like a plan. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. So, as you mentioned, right, I will be speaking today about phygital fashion and a bit more about the utility of NFTs. Because I think we're really at this moment of the industry where we've proven, right, that NFTs are here to stay. But I think what's especially relevant for fashion, especially phygital, is what's now the actual use case? How do we wear it? So that's what I'll be speaking about today. So a bit about me. My name is Lauren. I also go by Colo, my digital alter ego. I'm American, but I've lived and worked in fashion for the past 13 years. I've been in New York, London, and now I'm based in Paris. And so my journey has been focused mostly within design, but also within sustainability, product development, and yeah, really thinking about how do we improve the industry in kind of 2 ways. How do we make it more sustainable, but then also more equitable, more diverse, more open? So I've brought that mentality with me kind of in each space I've been in, no matter if it's more technical kind of creation or if it's more creative direction. And I think maybe a lot of people have, when they talk about entering Web3, maybe you have your life before or after Web3. So before I was working in luxury and accessory design, really focused on sustainability. How do we make products have less impact? So that was always in my mind while working at brands like Loewe and Saint Laurent. But then with the impact of the pandemic, it really brought digital to my focus and figuring out how can we use digital to improve our physical space. And so that's why we're going with phygital. At this point, we've argued if this word is relevant or not, but it's just still the easiest to say. So we'll get more into actually what that means and how brands can start to leverage it. So my journey into Web3, I began a clubhouse about a year and a half ago called The Future of Phygital. That was really about how do we combine these two worlds? How do we bring the best of both and really adapt products to what brings it most value in that space? So I start with this kind of bold statement since it kind of contradicts some other opinions in the space. So I don't believe, right, digital fashion will replace the physical. So what I think is that it's going to transform the industry and make it more sustainable. So that's why I'm combining, right, these two together. So I think we're still at a point where we get questions about what is this word, and maybe, right, as like Web3 and NFTs, we'll just stop using it eventually. It will just become the fashion industry as a blur between our digital and physical identities. But basically, right, like physical and digital, they have different constraints, they have different benefits. We're still very early in the digital space, considering we're not all sitting in our VR headset in the metaverse all day. We still wear physical things. So it's really, I think, how do we adapt our product to be as beneficial in each of those spaces? So for me to kind of understand how to start creating as a designer and start to essentially building this new industry, it's been really helpful for me to think about like what's the utility and what's the use case within each of these 3 spaces. So first, right, what's the pros and the cons of the physical? I think fashion still has a long way to go as far as becoming more sustainable, more circular, and we're definitely constrained by overproduction, excess, inventory. So that is a big barrier that we're facing right now in fashion. And so this is where I really saw the light of the tunnel, with digital, with Web3. And so how do we use that to make the physical process more sustainable? And we are still physical, so not to be forgotten. And so the second space is the augmented. So this, I am the most excited about, to be honest, because I see this to be what will be mass adopted first, because we still have this question of interoperability. Where will that go? So, for example, these earrings, I've worn them for almost every call I've had for the past year since we collaborated with Jevels and Entourage, which I didn't mention, but we are a DAO-led fashion label, and we create products in these three spaces. So our goal is really, how do you now have utility with digital and physical, not just creating art. So augmented, I feel, is especially interesting for this. And to be honest, why are we talking about digital fashion but not using it? It's an instant way to try it out. All you have to do is get a lens from Snapchat. We create it in Lens Studio, these earrings, for example, and then you use Snap Camera, and it can integrate to any video interface. So I recommend you all to give it a try for your if you have no evening plans. So that is the augmented, right? So we still don't have smart glasses. We're waiting for this to come along. So we're at the point where we're waiting for the tech. And lastly is the digital. So I think there's kind of two avenues where we've really started with utility is this idea of access. That would be the collectible. So really high resolution models that have beautiful turntables, but they don't necessarily have wearable utility. And so where this will go, right, is adapting these to different metaverses, Decentralised, spatial, it'll become, right, more diverse and ideally interoperable, but we do have some technical constraints around that. So for example, when you make a 3D model, each of these metaverses have different technical constraints around the poly count. So that means you can only have certain resolutions based on the constraint of that space. So that's why it's difficult, and that's why it's not interoperable. So those are the three spaces that basically at Entourage and myself as a creative director, consultant, seek to bridge and to really find the value and the point of each one. So going a bit further than Phygital, I call it metarality. So it's just the combination of these spaces. For me, it's just really important that we're building an industry that is like ideally better. And when I say better, I mean more sustainable environmentally and socially. So through this formula, through this methodology, this is how we frame our collections. So now I'm going to show you a couple of case studies that we've made over the past year and a half since we really began experimenting, collaborating, because I think we do a lot of talking about digital fashion, but actually using it is where we will get mass adoption. That's when you start to understand, right, the user experience. Why isn't it catching on? Why aren't we all wearing filters at this conference? So I think showing these visual case studies is especially interesting. And also, how do we buy them? How do we use them? Since, right, we're talking about decentralized commerce. So as I mentioned, this meta-reality formula covers these three spaces. The LTL is what we call it. You can also call it URL, unreal life, but we call it larger than life because like we believe that in the metaverse, you can really kind of defy what you are constrained by physically. So it's a lot more fantasy, I would say, couture. The ORL, we do more of a digital embroidery. So it's also interactive, has a lot of potential. I mean, think Pokemon Go plus fashion. I'm definitely excited about ORL on real life. And then lastly is the IRL. So I'm still wearing a suit. I still want to wear clothing that I want to have for a long time. And there's different ways that I'll explain of how we can integrate NFTs, Web3, and technology into physical as well. So going into that first example. So this is, I think, where the digital fashion industry began, is this idea of making a really beautiful render. And so this would be the example of like collectability. So this doesn't necessarily have, as of now, wearable utility, but what it does and can be used for is this idea of access. So you can see this translate quite easily to luxury. A holder of this NFT can now have access to an event. I know they were speaking in a panel about this before. So this is, I think, where it started. And the ultimate goal is to reach something that's as high resolution as this with utility, that's as easy to wear as your physical pieces. So that's essentially where we're going, and I believe, will get to. But I think we still have like quite a way to go. So here's an example on the Ultrage website. So we have we work as a DAO collective, and it's pretty impressive, I would say, what we figured out all by like ourselves. So we use Manifold to mint our collection, set up the properties, the price, and then also the